We're going to pick up this week where we left off last week. And I entitled this Event Horizon, Luke 21:28. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. There's going to be a moment when that point of no return is reached. We call it crossing the Rubicon. The event horizon with the black holes, once you reach that point, you can't go back. It sucks you in. Now, I'm always amused because scientists are so certain about this, but nobody's actually ever done this. I'm not sure. I'm just amused at what they think they know from millions of light years away. Anyway, I believe we have reached that moment of the event horizon. I believe that we reached it. Of course, if you were going to pick one moment, when would that be? When COVID-19 struck? That would kind of be the epicenter. But I think it actually, we would have to go back to a precursor of the election when Donald Trump was elected. That was that moment when the Civil War actually began in America. And it has only exasperated the things that happened with COVID-19 all associated. You realize that's been 4 years ago now? That's hard to believe. And as we have talked about prophecy, you'll remember I have told you while things look like they're really accelerating, and they are. I mean, they have for 4 years, things have accelerated. It could still be time. I mean, nobody knows. So one of the things that you need to keep in mind with the rapture and the second coming is the rapture is imminent. The second coming is not. You have to go all the way through the book of Revelation. All of those events have to happen before the second coming can happen. The rapture can happen at any time. That's imminent. And I'm astounded. Well, I'm not going to go into that now. At any rate, we have reached that point and things have begun to accelerate. The world, as I have told you, has never been where we are right now. I know it's 2024, and in a lot of ways you could say but from the standpoint of the things that are going on globally, we've never been here before. We've never been anything like this in the world. It is unusual and distinct. So when you see these things begin to come to pass, Jesus said, look up. He didn't say crawl in a hole. He didn't say get your bug out bag and get ready to get home. If you don't know what that is, that's a thing in the prepper community. You got to have a bug out bag ready to leave at a moment's notice to run out into the woods and live off the land. Yeah, that's not likely. I know how to do that. That's not going to work out good. I know how to do that. I really, really don't want to have to do that. I mean, it's going to be the worst of circumstances. I'm going to have to be pushed out. At any rate, Jesus didn't say do all that. He said, look up. Lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Now, he did talk about in Matthew 24:25, he did look about whenever some of these things like the abomination of desolation, when that happens, he said, pray that your flight not be in the winter. So we are having these times coming before us, but not for us. Do you understand what I mean by that? We have not been appointed unto wrath. And I'm kind of surprised at the pushback that is coming from people today that say, oh, you Christians that believe in the rapture, you're just wanting to escape. You don't want to have to go through the tribulation. Well, no, that's kind of a given. No, I don't want to go through the tribulation, but I'm going to go with what the Bible says. I have not been appointed. Christians have always been persecuted, but we have never been appointed to the wrath that God's going to pour out, like in book of Revelation talks about the bowls of wrath. He's not pouring that out on his children. He's pouring that out on, as Revelation calls them, earth dwellers, they that dwell upon the earth. So, and I'm amused at some of the people now that are coming out with this. Oh, you just don't want to go through the tribulation, believing in the rapture. That's just the escape theory. I'm amazed at those people that have been in the ministry for decades and have never preached a sermon on prophecy, have never done a Bible study on prophecy. And so, what I've been telling my friends there now, welcome finally to the conversation. To me, the Bible's not hard to understand. Uh, it's right there, black and white and red, if you will. And it's not really hard to understand. It's hard to swallow. It's hard to take it down. 37, 38, 39. Well, so I'll get it right out of the way up front. I hope not. But that has always been speculated. And we've always thought no, that it would require for the church to be taken out for it to happen. But we see it shaping up. And some prophecy teachers and buffs are starting to say, you know, we might see that. There's actually two wars. There's 37, 38 Ezekiel, but there's also the Psalm 83 war. And if Bill Solis is correct, that Psalm 83 bunch of enemies against Israel is a different set than Ezekiel 37, 38 in through there. And it looks like there's two. We've talked about this before. There's two rings. Those in closer to Israel are going to be the ones to come against. Those farther out are going to be Ezekiel 37, 38, 39. So all that to say, I don't know. I hope not. But that's one of the things I want to talk about tonight is how these things are shaping up. We began to talk about it last week. Things are coming into focus. Okay, but first, let's talk about a little preparatory information. I want to go back. Kenneth Copeland, back when COVID-19,
at 9:24.
he made a prediction. Now, what do you do with a prophet whose predictions don't come true? Well, in the Old Testament, they were supposed to kill him.
Now, Gloria and my usual routine is we go to bed early and listen to a couple of messages. But
That's called getting older.
Watch the 700 Club by 10:30, turn 11. Well, we had just listened to Brother Hayden, that first message, and suddenly the word of the Lord came to me. So I jumped up, ran, got my notepad, and wrote it down. 9:24. This disease called COVID-19 will be over much sooner than you think. Christian people all over this country praying have overwhelmed it. Give me all the glory, saith the Spirit of grace. And many people will come to know me through it. I'm still Lord over this nation. I'm on the throne, and faith in.
Because thousands upon thousands upon thousands take every word he says as if it was the word of God. And still do. I mean, even after that, still are they hypnotized? So I bring this up to talk about not only false teachers. As we near the end, the false teachers are going to get more false. But the apostasy of the church and the lack of discernment by the church is such that they will follow this. It's sad. Then I wanted to talk about I'm not sure any of us really fully comprehend the effect mentally and even spiritually on us because of of what happened the last 4 years. It's really been a trauma. I mean, we have been traumatized. Those of us who are saved and know what the Bible says, less traumatized than those that are just walking around blind. But the things that have happened to us are really unprecedented in the world. And the tentacles of the devil on this world, we've seen them, we've actually visualized them coming to pass. So this is secular, but I thought it was interesting about this concept.
When we think the news makes sense, the pandemic changed the lives of so many around the world, but now scientists say it even changed our personalities.
How can a pandemic change the way we act? There's no denying the pandemic was a major life event for almost everyone, whether or not you got COVID. Researchers collected data from more than 7,000 people, looking at the responses before, during, and after the pandemic. They looked at everything from neuroticism to openness to agreeableness. Researchers found that over the course of the pandemic, neuroticism increased. At the same time, agreeableness and openness and extroversion all decreased. They say the changes were most noticeable in young adults, but they're not sure why. Well, all this sounds like pretty bad news for the future. Experts say they're not so sure. Researchers say the real takeaway should be that our personalities are not set in stone. And that is Connecting the Dots.
While we didn't meet for, I don't know, a month, and then we met, but how many churches went months not meeting, and then when they met, really in the parking lot with masks on? I remember the pictures right here in the Kansas City area. Churches in our area that were meeting in the parking lot, sitting in the car, and they had masks on. I've seen that recently. People sitting in the car. It was a year ago. A kid pulled up in our back parking lot on a Saturday afternoon, and he was, I don't know, smoking dope or something. He was smoking a cigarette. It was sadly comical. I began to watch him out the window to see what he was doing for sure, and he was sitting there playing on his phone, and he had a mask on, and every once in a while he pulled the mask down, take a drag off his cigarette. What? I don't even know what to call that. He's afraid of a virus, but not cancer. Okay. But for those of us that kept our sanity and kept studying the Word, we were connected to each other, eyeball to eyeball. We were less crazy. But it had an effect on all of us. The uncertainty factor beginning, we didn't know what was what. We didn't know what they'd hatched up in the laboratory that was going to kill us all. And it didn't last for a short time like Copeland promised. We're still living with it. And when I mean it, not just COVID, we're living with the next thing that comes out of a lab that will be worse. And that kind of makes you crazy if you dwell on it, but we're anxious, depressed, and traumatized. Yeah? Actually not a bad article if you want to go find it. Greater Good Magazine, 7 Ways the Pandemic is Affecting Our Mental Health. And they go through some of the statistics talking about who's traumatized. This was interesting. Some of us are lonely, but not all. Stay-at-home orders and social distancing have left many people isolated, so it makes sense that we will be feeling lonely. And indeed, number 4, the effects depend on your personality, lifestyle, and demographics. The study that came out of China, Spain, Slovenia, younger people tend to be more depressed, anxious, stressed, and traumatized. Not older people, who are more at risk of the disease, but younger people who, all the information even early on that was coming out didn't affect young people. And yet they were traumatized by this. Oh, and of course we got to throw it in there. The disadvantaged groups are even worse off. Well, if they'd have saved their money, no, I'm not going to go there. I'll edit that out. Um, yeah. So read this, but don't swallow everything she says. Your work situation matters. Obviously, if you don't have to worry about money, you're going to be better off than people who have to worry about money, irrespective of race, right? And so that was going on. And if you were, and this is a real one here, if you were going through all the craziness and yet you had someone you had to care for who had COVID or maybe something else, can you imagine having somebody who had a disease, needed to be in the hospital, but we can't go to the hospital? There's a podcaster that I listen to on preparedness. He lived in Washington State at the time. At that time, he wasn't able to go to the hospital. They had been watching his colon for cancer. He hadn't had cancer. They were watching it. And he was 6 months to 8 months beyond when he was supposed to have had it done before he was able to have it done. He had cancer. They were able to do surgery and deal with it. But why? Okay. Sorry for taking up your time with that. I don't think we realize how much we have been traumatized by the last years. So we looked at things that are already in place prophetically. The big one, Israel becoming a nation again, taken from among the nations where they were scattered and brought back and have become a nation again. Unprecedented in history. Could we say miraculous? Yeah, it was a God thing. And then the deception factor. Has anybody felt like Fauci lied to us? Has anybody felt like the government lied to us? So there's no such thing as a conspiracy theory anymore. There's a conspiracy that's underfoot. So false Christ, we talked about that. Wars. Yeah, there's never been a time that we are at risk of war. From how many directions would the bombs come? One of the things that I hadn't thought about, I was listening to this podcast about preparedness, and they were talking about this book that had been written on nuclear war. And based on everything the government had, the government papers they could get, one of the problems with us responding to North Korea, if we shot at North Korea, it goes over the North Pole. As far as Russia knows, we're coming at them. Okay, get somebody on the phone, tell them we're not mad at you. Although now, would Putin believe us? So we're more at risk of a war from multiple directions. Obviously the big one's China and Russia, but North Korea and additionally Iran. And now what's coming through the southern border, we've got preparations for a war already going on. Sorry about that. Famines, pestilences, earthquakes, weather. And we talked about this a few months ago. There are actually new business startups who their business model is to change the weather in your area for you for enough money. They will seed the clouds. Now, I don't know how effective that is, but that doesn't seem like it's very environmentally safe to me. Anti-Semitism is global. The world has never been here before. We had Hitler, but it wasn't global. And then the gospel preached all over the world. And then some of the characteristics of things that are not in place, but we see them coming into focus. We talked about all of these. And these are things that the Bible predicts, and we already see the skeleton of how they're going to look. Digital money. Is the world ripe for a world leader? Somebody Some adult in the room, please stand up and take control. I'm ready for somebody like that. Difference is, I know who that's going to be. That's going to be Jesus. So what do? Wring our hands. Jesus said, heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. And that's said in those three Gospels. Not that we needed it more, but that seemed like he's hammering it home. You can trust that he's going to do everything he said he was going to do. So far, he's batting 1,000. The things he predicted in their time, they came to pass. Not like Copeland. So we have been told to watch. And we don't have much time left. Got business meeting next week. But Jesus gives in this private briefing to the disciples in Matthew 24, at least the early parts private briefing. There may have been more people by the time he got done. But he gives a parable from nature, a template from the past, an illustration about security, and a cultural picture that I think we need to see. Let's look at this parable from nature. Matthew 24:32. In the midst of this prophecy briefing, Jesus says to them, this is actually in the latter half, but he's kind of giving a general about the era, what you need to pay attention to. Now, learn a parable of the fig tree. Now, who are we talking about? There's any question who is in the mind of Jesus. That's Israel. That's the symbol of Israel. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye, when you see these things, see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. So, this parable about the fig tree, I believe, and almost everybody who believes in prophecy that I know believes, that 1948 was when those leaves began to come out. And the great question is, how long is this generation going to be? That generation will not pass away. It's an intriguing discussion. We don't have time to go into all of it now, but he gave us that. And then there's a template from the past, verse 37. But the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. But as in the days they were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Then shall two be in the field, and one shall be taken, and the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, and the other left. I don't want to bust anybody's bubble, but this will bust some of your bubbles. Two will be in the field, one shall be taken, and the other left. Everything, please listen up, knowing where to rightly divide the word of truth is everything. Chapter 24 and 25, Jesus is talking about the Great Tribulation. Actually talking about the tribulation, which is 7 years. The Great Tribulation is the last 3.5 years. So he's talking about the tribulation time, which I believe will come into play right with or soon after the rapture of the church. So this is not the rapture. This is not the rapture, even though we have Gaither songs that tell us so. There's going to be something that's going to happen during the tribulation. Now, we've got plenty to believe about the rapture. We don't need to go into not rightly dividing the word of truth. This is a period of time that has to do. So all of these things relate, for example, the abomination of desolation. We haven't seen that. We're not going to see that. That's going to happen after the church is removed. That's during the tribulation. So the abomination of desolation, All of these things we will see accelerating in preparation for these things, right? If the abomination of desolation takes place, that means that the Antichrist is going to have to sit in the temple in Jerusalem. Is there a temple in Jerusalem? No. Are we getting close? The red heifer may have been selected by now. I don't know.
They actually found some red heifers in the state of Texas that they're analyzing.
10 of them. They've eliminated 3 of them, the last I'd heard. Only a Pharisee could miss the whole point of what God was trying to do and look for hairs on a red heifer. But that's what they're doing. So, and I don't care. We don't need the temple. We are the temple until we're not. And they're going to read. So you see, when you rightly divide the word of truth, we can now see these things are coming into focus, but they're not yet. And that's intriguing to me. So our time is gone. We will look at the illustration about security and the cultural picture that Jesus uses in the next verses in 2 weeks when we get together.